Thank you very much for that, Michael. I want to start with what we're here for, because one of the things I think we have actually done quite well this year is define what our purpose is, what we're here for. I shorten it to say our society exists to make things better for people, and from going around talking to members, that seems to be resonating with people. It's a charitable purpose, it's for the public good, people can understand what that means, and my sense is it fits with a lot of the interest in public health, social justice, the purpose of why many of us became psychologists. The statement has been quite carefully crafted. It talks about the evidence base of psychology, and I think in terms of what we do in terms of public influencing, that's really important. It also makes the point that we're here not just for individuals, for those of us who work individually, clinically with people, but also for communities and wider society. And I think that's a very important bedrock for why we're here as an organisation, that we have that kind of depth and reach. We've called it Building for the Future, so a view from the architects. We're some of the architects up here. We've got actually some more of the architects down in the front row in terms of our senior staff team. I've just talked a bit about what we're here for. Very important as well to situate ourselves, I think, in our context in Europe and internationally, so we'd like to say something about that to you. Something about how we get our message across, not just to the membership in forums like this, but also much more widely in terms of our political influencing and what we do. Want to talk about leadership. We certainly want to talk about some of the changes that we're making in leadership in the society and what that is going to mean for our members and for our progress. And we know we need to talk about culture and climate. That matters to a lot of you. It certainly matters to us. It matters to our staff. It matters to our membership. And we know that that's something that we need to take out and look at and make sure that we have a society that, to coin a phrase, is for the many, not the few, and works for everybody. The building blocks of change, we want to talk about that and also what the end result will look and feel like. And certainly Kate's got some important things to say about that in terms of equality, diversity and inclusion. But before we go any further, I'd like to extend again a very warm welcome to our international and European guests. Our European guests were welcomed specifically this morning. So this afternoon, can I particularly welcome our guest, Senior Director for International Affairs, Amanda Clinton from America, Lynn Littlefield, the Chief Executive of Your Society in Australia, and also Quentin Abraham, who's from New Zealand. My little Freudian slip there is because I've been doing a lot of research into our history over the last week and learning about the fact that, of course, Australia and New Zealand were branches of our society and then became independent in 66 and 67, was it? Yeah, okay. So very, very warm welcome to the three of you. Some of you may have become aware that we're in the European semester of psychology. Our society is very proud members of the European Federation of Psychologists, and we have the president here, Telma Marino Baptista, who will be addressing us tomorrow. The European semester is a real opportunity for us to focus on psychology in a particular country in Europe, and it's been our privilege to be hosting that in this first 6 months of 2018. So being European and international citizens is very important to us. We also attend many of the European events, for example, the European Congress of Psychology, which was held in Amsterdam in 2017. Many of you will probably have seen that Russia is hosting the Congress, which will be held in 2019. So we have Anna here from Russia promoting that. And we're certainly hoping that many of our members will choose to put submissions into that Congress so that we have a really good show from the United Kingdom as part of that event. We go to the President's Councils, we make sterling contributions, I hope, to the EFPA boards, standing committees and task forces. Certainly I can see one of the chairs in the audience there, but I think we've got 2 or 3 conveners of those boards and task forces with us at the conference. The International Union of Psychological Science is also very important to us. We're very pleased to have the next president of the union, Pam Moras. I can't actually quite see Pam at the moment in the audience, but I know she's certainly here with us today. And we will be attending the General Assembly in Montreal. We have memoranda of understanding with many psychological societies. We will be hearing about the one in Ireland in the next session after this. And we're also going to be signing a memorandum tomorrow with our colleagues from Portugal. So that's the international context to situate us with where we are. I also mentioned policy influencing, another area where I think we've made huge progress in the last year. The policy unit, led by Lisa Morrison-Coulthard, our Acting Director of Policy, has managed to set up an all-party parliamentary group, which is a very, very important vehicle for influencing policymakers, politicians and public policy here in the UK. We've had some very successful meetings, including one last week on children and young people's mental health, and there is a packed agenda with the next meeting, I think in June, where we're going to be talking about internet trolling. So this is, I think, is something that our membership has wanted us to be much more high profile in over the years, and something where I think we're making very great strides. Another thing that I think has been very successful in how we're approaching our policy is actually to have core policy objectives. One of the strengths of psychology is that we're actually a really broad discipline, and that means for the complex problems that face the world and face society, we have a lot to say. Our members can bring different perspectives to what it is that we're trying to address. But it also means that we can sound in the wider sphere fragmented, talking about lots and lots of different things, and so people begin to wonder, well, what is the BPS actually trying to say? And I think our core policy objectives, things about prevention, things about using the evidence base, wanting government to have all policies evidence-informed in terms of the psychological evidence base, I think is again enabling us to achieve quite a bit of traction in terms of that public influencing. Changing governance and leadership. Very important part of what an organisation needs to do, I think, is to renew its leadership periodically. We're delighted that Sarb, that you'll be hearing from soon, has joined us as our new Chief Executive. This is week 2, or was it week 3? I lose count. But anyway, it's at the beginning of week 3. So that is a very significant appointment, and deliberately a very different appointment for our society in terms of the profile that Sarb will have in terms of his experience in policy influencing, in international work and development, and with member organisations. We're also going to reconstitute our Board of Trustees. Many organisations out there are now bringing in trustees who are not part of their particular discipline. That, I think, is very healthy. Those that are doing it, like the Science Council, the Royal College of Psychiatrists, are reporting how good it is for them, how successful it is, and that is a model that we're going to follow. We've reconstituted the subcommittees of our Board of Trustees, so we're focusing our trustees on what we need to focus on, which is strategy, which is risk, and which is governance, and repatriating the operational work to the Chief Executive and the senior leadership team. So we're also going to be removing our honorary officer roles. That is with the agreement of everybody that society is now too big and too complex to be being run by volunteers. And that's an area that we're significantly professionalising. And I talked before about culture. We have some values. They're probably values that most of us would agree with. But do we talk about them enough? Do we share them enough? Are they really at the heart of everything we do? Do we have a culture that is transparent, that feels inclusive? Do members feel responded to? Do members of the public feel responded to in everything we do? So there's quite a lot of work that Sarb is going to be leading around culture and our values in terms of making those real and tangible to our membership. Refocusing the organisation on the needs of our members, I think, is very important. There are some particular initiatives around the government's post-18 review of higher education that we know are very important to our academic members. And Kate is going to be working with Andrea Finkelgates, our Director of Qualifications and Standards, to lead a piece of work on that. We also know that for our practitioner members, you want a lot more support in terms of your professional context, and that again is something that we're going to make significant strides in, even over the coming weeks, in terms of trying to build some proposals around that, which Antoinette Wells and Sarb will be leading on. A couple of key changes before I hand over to Sarb. Members will have seen the proposals for the interim Senate, which is our proposal to very much democratise what our society is here for and what we stand for, building on successful models in other organisations. So I do urge you to have a look at those proposals and actively participate in that Senate process. We're re-establishing our strategy boards. That, again, I think will be very positive for the organisation in terms of bringing together our focus, particularly initially on education and training, and also on public policy influencing. And you'll be hearing more about that over the next few weeks and months. And finally, enhancing member benefit. Those of you who are in member networks will know that we're making considerable effort now to reset, in many cases, our relationship with our member networks, valuing what our member networks contribute and how we're going to work with you and support you and help you organise what you need to focus on. We've been doing some work to pay the article processing charge in our BPS Wiley journals, which is something that's been pushed forward by our research board. And we're doing a lot more around the next generation in terms of revamping what we do in terms of careers in psychology and how we actually engage with that next generation of people who want to be psychologists. We also want to invest in our annual conference so that future annual conferences are a much more significant event in our society. And we've put some considerable investment into next year's conference and we'll welcome your ideas on how we do that. So I'd now like to hand over to Sarb to talk about the future and what our plans are for the future.
Good afternoon. My name's Sarb Bajwa, and as Nicola just said, I joined BPS 2 weeks ago. And I'd just like to say I'm delighted and honoured to be given the chance to lead BPS. Certainly from my short time here, I believe there's a huge amount of goodwill, ambition and commitment within the organisation and across the membership base. We believe in what we are doing and we know it makes a difference. And as far as I'm concerned, we want to be able to deliver that. I just thought I'd say, spend a few minutes telling you a little bit about myself. So I'm not a psychologist by training, but that does provide me, I think, with a fresh set of eyes with which to view the organisation and a fresh perspective. My background, however, is in leading membership organisations, and I've done that across a number of sectors, taking them on a journey of change or raising their profile or increasing their impact. So I've worked for membership bodies in the legal services sector, the financial services sector, and more recently in the energy sector, particularly with gas and engineering. So if you want to ask me about intelligent pigging, now's the chance to do it. Now, and I think what excites me about working in membership bodies is the opportunity to work with experts and leaders in their fields and translating that knowledge and expertise into tangible actions that have a positive impact. That's what gets me up in the morning. So my message to you is give me your psychological content and I will deliver it. Just give you a few examples of how I've done that in the past. So at the Law Society, I was responsible for driving forward some of our policy work, and that meant working with a range of actors to lobby and advise decision makers on a wide number of issues. So just a few highlights. During my time there, I led work that fed into the development of the human rights strategy for the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. And we also worked on advising government on the Human Rights Act. So this was the European Human Rights Act. And at the time, the Conservatives were thinking of replacing this with a British Bill of Rights. And our view then, and it seems to be holding true, was that it is impossible to derogate from the Act unless we leave Europe. So perhaps inadvertently we did sow the seeds of Brexit, so apologies. I've worked with law societies from across the Commonwealth in developing globally agreed sets of principles for pro bono work and engaged with lots of actors with different interests, different positions in pursuing policy objectives. And I think one of the important things that I learned during my time there was that it's really important to know how and when to pick your battles. I'm just going back to that example about the Human Rights Act. Well, we were working hard as a team of about 8 people working on advising the government on whether it was possible or not to leave the European Human Rights Act. There was a certain newspaper, I won't name it, ran a daily headline campaign trying to undermine our position. My favourite one was a headline that was focused on how Europe was interfering in our lives by trying to decide how curved bananas could be before they were sold in our shops. So in an attempt to rebut this, I had 3 policy advisors spend 4 days searching through EC legislation to find out if that was true. It's not, if you're interested. But what we did was we lost precious time. We were constantly sidetracked and always on the back foot because we were trying to respond to their daily drip feed of stories. And sometimes, and I think this is a message for all of us, is we need to focus. And interestingly, there are similar battles and lessons learned from my last role, which was working, as I mentioned, for a professional body in the gas industry. And whilst there, I worked with BEIS. BEIS is the Ministry of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And our role was to try and develop a framework that would allow the UK to decarbonise by 2050. So we're trying to meet our climate change targets there. And part of my role was engaging with experts, trying to bring them to the table, bring their evidence and opinions to ministers. And one of the key messages that we kept getting back from government was that it was really valuable to have a professional body's view presented to them. Right? So they really relied on us. In fact, that led to a formal arrangement between ourselves and BEIS where we were called on to provide expert advice for them whenever they had discussions with other partners. And I think that's somewhere where I think I would like to take BPS as well. So I've got a wealth of experience in developing policy, drawing in experts, engaging with and understanding stakeholders, recognising blockers, and trying to deliver impact. And I think one of the challenges I faced in my last organisation, and I see some similarities here at BPS, was around the fragmented nature of the industry. I'm thinking about the gas industry now. So privatisation 30 years ago led to the breakup and the marginalisation of what used to be a single national coherent industry. You all know it, it's British Gas. 30 years later, it's split. The logic of capitalism has meant that people have focused in on their particular niche. And what that industry was presented with 5 or 6 years ago was the existential challenge to their very existence. They were being asked to decarbonise, and they had no idea how to respond because they were so fragmented. And I think that one of the great things that we did at my last role was to actually bring that industry together. So that's offshore, onshore, suppliers, the supply chain, the distributors, people who ran the markets, and the trainers of these people. For the first time in 30 years, the industry came back together to address a challenge that threatened to wipe them off the map. I want to be able to bring psychology back together. I think we all have more in common than we have that sets us apart. I've also spent many years in growing membership organisations, and that's developing new products and services for members, working internationally, delivering conferences, working on PR campaigns. And in my last role, I set up an office in Hong Kong to service our members based in the Far East and China. I formed partnerships with sister member societies and with partners external to whatever society I was working in to try and make sure that we deliver impact. Sometimes we are not the best placed organisation to effect change, but that doesn't mean we don't have a role to place. Well, that's my job pitch over and done with. So what am I going to do for you? So I like to think about my role in terms of 4 Ds. So the first one's around delivery. So we've embarked on a process of change, and I want to make sure that we deliver it. And I think the other important element of that, certainly from my perspective, the senior management team, is to ensure that as a society we are held accountable to you. So delivery is a clear focus for me. Second D is disaggregate. I think we talk a lot about understanding members and what their needs are and how we need to respond to them. And I think the best way to do that is to try and disaggregate the membership. And I'll put that in plain, simple English. Simply put, a professor working in a psychology department is going to want something very different from BPS than a student who's just embarked on their first degree. We need to try and understand that, and we need to try and provide that benefit to those particular groups. And that's a priority for us as well. The third D is around digitisation. I want our organisation to be more nimble, more flexible, more responsive. And one easy way to do that is by starting to engage digitally. But interestingly, this afternoon I just had a conversation with some of the branch chairs, and they're all crying out for a simple process. So this digitisation is all about simplifying our processes as well, so that you guys can use it in order to drive forward the work that you're doing. And the final D is around demonstration. As I said, we're embarked in this process of change, and there's always risk associated with change. So wherever possible, I want to try and trial it. I want to learn whatever lessons we can learn, and we've already started this process by introducing the Senate, as Nicola mentioned. So if I come back in a year, you can ask me whether I've delivered against my 4 Ds. I suspect many of you recognise this. So when I first joined BPS, this was presented to me, and inside the office we refer to it as the map of doom. It shows the sections, the divisions, the branches and the subdivisions that exist within BPS. I think it's a little bit overwhelming. But at the same time, it's remarkable in its breadth and range of expertise that we possess as a single organisation. That's something we forget too easily. It's something we should be proud of. But from my perspective, it does demand, operationally speaking, a huge amount of work from the BPS staff. So every year there are hundreds of events, hundreds of meetings, hundreds of AGMs, and that all takes up time, energy and cost. In addition to that, there's replication of work, and sometimes, maybe even more importantly, good work's happening and we are completely unaware of it. And I don't know whether this is an outcome of the first phases or whether this led to the beginning of the structural review. And I think that's a bit of a misnomer. I think I'm starting to refer to it as a society review, because actually we're fundamentally looking at what the role of BPS should be, how we can support members, and how we can make an impact. So when I think about it, I try to imagine a world where there is no BPS, but a group of like-minded psychologists come together to form a new learned society. What does it look like? What does it do? Who can join? How should it be structured? How should it be governed? I think it's that type of big, bold thinking that we're going to have to engage in if we're going to have an identity for our members and if we can respond to our operational environment. Anyway, I dislike this slide so much that we designed this one instead. It's much nicer. It shows the same information as the last slide. But importantly for me, BPS is at the heart of it. Our purpose is to assist you. Organisations exist for that purpose, and that is it. So that society review, which is what I'm going to try and call it from now on, is really about improving our impact. It's about supporting both our learned society and our professional body functions, delivering more nimbly, more flexibly, more quickly, and to improving our processes. And this journey that we've taken is not a new one. So I started looking at when we started this, and I'm sure you're all aware of this, but it's 2013, it's 5 years ago. And at the beginning of that journey, we carried out a survey. We don't know what date that was. We might do somewhere, but I haven't quite located that. So we've carried out a survey, and the overwhelming response from the membership was, we want change, but not my bit of BPS. That's perfect. Right, so there's a little bit of NIMBYism going on. Then in 2016, the BPS staff developed 3 options for change development. That went out to the membership, and opinion was evenly split amongst those 3 options. So again, we kind of felt that there was a bit of no steer in the direction that we needed to move forward. And then the process stalled. And I think it stalled because of that. I think we approached the structural review from the perspective of this slide, and this mindset dominated our thinking. What we hadn't realised was changing the structure meant multiple changes were happening in the rest of the organisation. There were loads of unanticipated, unforeseen knock-on effects, and we hadn't really thought about that. So that's why when I talk about the structural review being a society review. I think that's what it always was. We just thought about it from this perspective. So in mid-2016, we started to unpack that structural review. It was becoming a society review. And we identified 10 work streams. We did some work on the work streams. I'll talk about them in a minute. And that went to the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees suggested that they needed to go out for consultation. That was in 2017. We then went to a program of online shows and road shows and consulting with our members, and we fed that back to the trustees in the summer of 2017. And this is where we are now. I think there was a gap. Lots of people left the organisation, but we've now got a project officer appointed to try and manage this process. We're trialling some of the elements in change, so the Senate is a good example of that. And we've labelled this 2018 as the year of consultation. It's really the year of communication, engagement, ideas, sharing knowledge, in order to try and effect this change as rapidly as we can. We can't let it go on for another 5 years. And this slide shows some of the progress we've made against some of the work streams. I'm not going to go through all of them individually, but clearly there's still quite a lot of work to do in some cases, particularly when you look at the English branches, the nations, the networks, the professional bodies. And I think what we've done is we've picked the low-hanging fruit. We've done the easy stuff. So actually, when you look at the work that's been done on the governance, the Senate, the priorities and the project planning, those are all internal mechanisms to BPS. So the challenge for us is to go out and talk to you guys, get your views. And we need to do that probably face-to-face. So I think there's a long period of actually face-to-face dialogue and consultation and seeking out your views before we can progress what the new society looks like. Okay, so what are we doing? So in order to support that process of change, internally we've embarked on something that we're calling, or is known as, a model called the theory of change. And what we're trying to do in this theory of change is really work backwards. So we know what the impact we are trying to achieve. We work backwards from that to try and identify the outcomes that will help us achieve the impact. We work backwards from that to look at the intermediate outcomes. We look backwards to that to look at the activities and inputs. And what we then will have is a connected pathway of change which we can then manage and monitor internally. And that will help us project plan the change going forward as an organisation. And that's what it looks like for us at BPS at the moment. So that's the theory of change as applies to our 5 key stakeholder groups. Membership, clearly, we want to grow our membership. We want to make sure you guys are happy. We want to deliver services that you want. We want to tell you a story that makes you want to join BPS. The public, that's part of our charitable remit. It's part of what we do, why we do it. We believe in the public good. We think our science has got something to offer. Networks, where all the knowledge and the research and the ideas originate from. Education, clearly we've got an interest in how the next generation of psychologists are trained and making sure those standards are met. And then policy work. Everything we try and do, everything we do that wants to make an impact, we want to try and influence government policy. So those are our 5 key stakeholders. And that's just an example, and I'm really not going to go through that slide. That's just an example of what that might look like for our public stakeholder group. I think what's important to me is you can also break down the inputs and activities a layer down on the left there. So we can start putting in financial inputs, and that will help us develop a business model and a budget that backs this strategy up. I think the two have been disconnected within BPS for a while. So this theory of change is not just supporting the change model that we've got, but it's actually the beginning building blocks of a new strategy for the organisation. And that's just another way of looking at the same model. What I'm really trying to say here is that in theory, the activities should drive the outcome, they should drive the objectives, which means we reach the strategic goals. But also internally is an important message here, I think, because under activities we can identify individual and team objectives so that actually everybody in the organisation knows how their work contributes to reaching our strategic goals. And I think there are a couple of sort of principles, I suppose, I've got to be careful with language. You guys are going to pick me apart. But they are principles to me, I think. And one of them is around actually letting you have the voice over how your organisation is run. We exist for you. And so one way we're trying to do that is become more democratic. And the Senate is a good example of that. We're trialling it. We know we may get it wrong, but we're going to try and keep pushing on through with that, with the emphasis being on we want to hear your voice. I also think that internally we're undergoing a process of change. So we will be much more visible. By we, I mean the chief exec, i.e. me, and the senior management team. We need to go out and meet you guys. We need to understand what your problems are, what your needs are, how we can effect change for you. We want to enhance the experience that you have of being a member of BPS. And I think there's an important one here as well, especially when we're looking at policy, because if we go back to that map of doom, the breadth of areas that we work on is enormous. Actually, we've got to be focused, and we've got to decide which are our key priorities, and that's part of the Senate's role. But it's also important to understand what our role in that is. So, maybe we will have to work with other organisations, and maybe our role will be different depending on the nature of the campaign that we might be involved in. But we've got to become more amenable to working with external partners. And I think psychology is not a discipline that's confined to the shores of the UK. And I'm a great believer in international collaboration. There's lots to be learned from all over different parts of the world. And so what we want to try and do is have some continuity with our European partners and other international partners. So what does success look like for me? Well, I want to be in charge of a body of which you can be proud. I want it to punch above its weight. And my favourite example about this is Liberty, the human rights organisation, not the store. Liberty is a tiny organisation. It's got a £3 million turnover. But when Shami Chakrabarti was in charge, she was on Newsnight every single night. And that's where we should be. That should be our aspiration. So we deliver well above our weight. We want a culture and a climate internally that is focused on responding to your needs and delivering services to you. And I think we need to develop internally a commitment to treating and dealing with members with respect, integrity, promptly and efficiently. And I think that needs a bit of a culture change internally. Want to be externally focused. I've already spoken a little bit about engaging with a wide range of partners. But I also think the external focus element is important because we need to stay current and we need to stay relevant. The world's changing at an incredibly fast pace. And that means planning for the future, anticipating change, and engaging with other stakeholders. And I want us to be focused on our expertise. That's our USP, that breadth. We are one discipline. We can talk to you about anything. We know everything in that field. Right, so we need to recognise and promote our profession. That's an important element of the work that we do. But also, it's very clearly around communicating the research, drawing on our expertise, and translating that into tangible actions. And we want to become a more modern and efficient organisation. We know we're a bit clunky. We know we're a bit old-fashioned. We want to change that. So finally, I recognise I'm on a steep learning curve. And one way I'm going to address that is by going and meeting with you and trying to attend as many meetings and as many boards as I can. So please don't throw me out the first time you see me. And at the same time, I want to urge any member who wants to contact me or talk to me, please knock on my door. It's always open. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that was a really great exposition of where you are, where you've come from, and what you're aiming to achieve for the society. I think we're at an extraordinarily exciting time for the society. There's a lot of change going on and we're going forward in a new direction, and I'm really delighted as a member myself of so many years standing that we are actually going to be doing that. So thank you very much. It'll be interesting to see what happens, and I'm sure we'll get behind it. So I'm going to spend about 10 minutes or so going through a few slides of my own. And I think one of the things that Sarb alluded to and Nicola alluded to is one of the pieces of work that we've been very engaged with doing, and that's going to be that started and going forwards will increase in momentum, is a change in emphasis in the way that the society is governed and the way that the society is actually led. And the emphasis is going to move away from the Board of Trustees, and it's going to go where it should be, to the Chief Executive and to the Senior Management Group. So Nicola mentioned that really as a Board of Trustees, what we should be doing is that we should be looking at strategy, we should be looking at governance, and we should be looking at risk. And that's quite right, because those are the roles of a Board of Trustees under the Charity Commissioner's requirements of us. But also when you're actually taking on this role, and I'll be going into it later on in the summer, you can have some areas of expertise that you want to actually bring to the society. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about now, because I'm an academic. I'm not a practitioner. I have got a practitioner background, but in a completely different discipline. I am an academic, and there are some things which we do as a society in some areas within the society that I think we need to be able to give back to the academic members, because every single psychologist who goes on to become a practitioner will have, for the most part, started their career as an undergraduate student and taking a psychology degree, and those people who have gone on to do postgraduate qualifications will more than likely have gone to university to do them. So our academic partners, our academic members are an extraordinarily important part of the society going forward. So, what we've been listening to, I think, is about an opportunity to refocus. And it's about who we are and how we're perceived. Now, I chaired Ethics Committee for a full 3 years and then another 2 years, and I only stepped down last year when I took on the President-elect role. It's a job I really enjoyed. It was a role I was really very pleased and proud to be able to make a contribution to. And the Society's Ethics Committee actually has equality under its remit as well. We had responsibility for it. And we did a piece of work which was launched in March of last year, when we had been approached by the Science Council, who had a declaration of equality, diversity and inclusion, and working with Lisa Morrison-Coulthard and colleagues on the Ethics Committee and with colleagues in the Member Standards Board, we devised our response to the Science Council's declaration. Our declaration of equality, diversity and inclusion was launched by Nicola last March. But it's all very well having that ambition, and it's all very well having a strategy, but now is the time to actually start to put that ambition into practice, because any strategic document is only as good as the operational document that underpins it. Otherwise, it's just warm words. We have to be seen to be walking the walk as well as talking the talk. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we've decided that one really important way of going forwards is to engage with something that some of you may be familiar with if you're in part of an academic environment, is the Equality Challenge Unit's Athena Swan Awards. Does that sound familiar to anybody? If it does, can you... Oh, fantastic. That's really good news. The Equality Challenge Unit is one of those sort of, I think you might call them, it's a body that's been set up to provide support to higher education. And in fact, there are 3 of them that have just come together after a review called the Bell Review into an organisation which is an umbrella organisation called Advance HE. You're probably used to or know of the Higher Education Academy, and I know that Julie Hume is here, and Julie has been very, very involved with the Higher Education Academy. The Equality Challenge Unit was the other area, and the other group was the Leadership Foundation for Higher Education, and that's something also that some of you in academia may have been involved with. I know I have. So they've come together under Advance HE, and the ECU, the Equality Challenge Unit, has a number, 2 at the moment, charter marks. One of them, which was predominantly set up to look at the advancement of women in science, which is Athena Swan. The Athena, because of the goddess of wisdom, and the Swan for Science Women's Academic Network. And they also have a race equality charter mark as well. I've been involved with Athena Swan since 2009 and have led on it in a number of institutions. But what actually has happened is that within the last year, the Equality Challenge Unit has reached out to other organisations, such as the BPS and Royal Society of Geography, Council of the Deans of Medical Schools, and we are now starting to think about an organisational Athena Swan. So the original Athena Swan was for universities. It then moved into research institutes. It's gone international as well. It's gone off to Australia, and it's in Ireland too, Southern Ireland too. But now we're going to have an organisational charter. So what we are going to be doing in the society over the next 18 months, the Board of Trustees, we took it, Andrea Finkelgates and I took it to the Board of Trustees in March and said, we want the society to start the work so that we can achieve an organisational Athena Swan Bronze Award for the BPS. And we're absolutely delighted that the Board of Trustees thought, yes, that's the right thing to do. It's a really good example of how we demonstrate our commitment to equality, diversity and inclusion. So that's a piece of work we'll be doing over the next 18 months. It's going to be hard, it's going to be tough. Anybody who's been involved in an Athena Swan Award knows that it's not for the faint-hearted. But what it will do, it'll make us dig deep. It'll make us really bottom out where we are what we have to do. And then, if we're successful, we're going to have an action plan and we're going to have to deliver against it. So that's one thing we'll be doing. And in relation to providing support for society members, we are also going to be doing something else as far as Athena Swan is concerned. In February, I attended the Royal Biological Society, held a free workshop for biologists and universities that were biology departments that were going for an Athena Swan Award to provide help, support, examples of good practice. We're going to do the same. So we're planning the spring of 2019 that we will draw on the very considerable body of expertise that we actually have within the discipline to set up a workshop for academic departments and schools in the UK to come along, share good practice to help support the society and psychology as it develops its Athena Swan Awards. And I'm really delighted that we're going to do that. It's a big step forward for us in terms of demonstrating equality, diversity and inclusion. So what next? Well, coming back to who we are and how we're perceived, I think it's fair to say that we're living in turbulent times in UK higher education, particularly in England. And there's a hugely varying difference in fee arrangements between England and the devolved nations. But particularly in England, this last year has been an annus horribilis, I think, in terms of thinking about what's university for, why do people go there, what do they get out of it, and does it provide value for money? And at the moment, well, relatively recently, the government launched a post-18 funding and education review. And in fact, the consultation for that closed on the 30th. It closed 2 days ago. I think it has profound implications, potentially profound implications for psychology and the delivery of psychology degrees in universities. And I think it's vitally important that we as a professional body and a learned society actually start to engage with that debate. Because if differential fees come in, and that's always a possibility in this particular review, that could potentially have quite a considerable impact on psychology undergraduate education. So what we are going to do, and this is a piece of work that I'm going to be chairing with Andrea Finkelgates and other colleagues, and Sarb spoken about partnership, and I think we have to work in partnership with universities, and we also have to work in partnership with the Association of Heads of Psychology Departments to actually get on the front foot with this, to think about what the implications, even if it's a modelled implication, of a change to differential fees could be for psychology as a profession. I think there are arguments to be made, and I also think as well that there's good practice elsewhere in other parts of Europe and elsewhere that we could actually draw on. but we've got to start to engage with this argument now, because this review is going to be reporting in the spring next year. There's a very strong political imperative behind it. We really need to make sure that we have a strong voice and reasoned arguments to support it. So, we have an opportunity to refocus and we can demonstrate our impact. So, in the coming year and in the year afterwards when I'm Vice President, these are the things that I'm going to be concentrating on, apart from engaging with the business of risk and governance and strategy for the BPS as a member of the Board of Trustees. I'm going to be looking at equality, diversity and inclusion. We're going to be looking at delivering an Athena Swan Award. We're going to be delivering a workshop for our academic members. We are also going to start to engage with the issue of student mental health. We all know that there is a rise, an awareness of a rising tide of student mental ill health within society, both within for children and for young people, and in universities we're particularly aware of that. I think there's a role for psychology in actually saying, well, what are those issues? How can we actually start to provide some guidance around it? And also not just for students in universities, but also for our academics too, because there's a huge level of academic emotional labour that goes on in supporting students in universities who actually are experiencing mental health difficulties. And all of these are ways that we can actually demonstrate that the BPS is making a difference, having an impact, giving something back to the members, and actually raising our game and raising our profile through a number of the different sort of venues, opportunities and partnerships that we actually have. And essentially, I think it's about making things better for the members and making things better for society as well. And it comes back to this. Nicola started her talk about the impact statement. I'm acutely aware that's something that I want to be able to make a contribution to in some small way over the coming 2 years. Sarb is definitely leading the charge in this respect as well. I think it's a hugely important and exciting time to be a member of the society. I'm absolutely convinced that in 5 years' time we're going to be looking at a very different organisation that is going to be held in even greater esteem than it is now. And I, for one, am really looking forward to seeing what comes out of it. So thank you very much.